I need to speak carefully in this message because what I'm about to say has been exaggerated in many circles, and I refuse to build fear where wisdom should stand. But I also refuse to stay silent about practices I personally witnessed when I was involved in witchcraft. There was a reason water was often placed beside beds overnight. Not because water itself is evil, not because leaving a glass uncovered automatically invites darkness, but because symbols matter in occult practice. Objects become focal points for intention, and water, being fluid, absorbent, and life sustaining, was frequently used as a spiritual conductor. I remember gatherings where we were taught that stagnant water holds energy. The longer it sits, the more it receives. That was the language used. Intention would be projected toward an object, and that object would serve as a symbolic container. It wasn't the water's chemistry that mattered. It was the agreement behind it. Now hear me clearly. Most people who leave water by their bed are doing something completely normal. They are simply preparing for thirst in the night. There is nothing mystical about that act by itself. But here is the hidden risk, not superstition, not paranoia, but awareness. When people begin to adopt habits rooted in fear, based teaching without understanding context, they open themselves to anxiety instead of authority. In occult systems, fear is far more valuable than objects. Fear is the real conduit. What made overnight water useful in ritual wasn't the water. It was belief, focus, and intention directed toward it. So the question is my water cursed? The real question is, who has authority in my home? In the next chapter, I'm going to explain how objects become symbolic anchors in spiritual systems and why believers must understand the difference between superstition and spiritual alignment before reacting. Let me take you inside the mindset I was trained in, because if you don't understand the mechanism, you will either dismiss everything or become afraid of everything. Both extremes are dangerous. In witchcraft, ordinary objects were never powerful on their own. Power was assigned through intention, repetition, and agreement. A candle was just wax until someone focused on it with purpose. A mirror was just glass until it became a symbolic gateway in someone's belief system. Water was just water until it was treated as a spiritual container. We were taught that objects can become anchors. That word meant a physical point tied to a spiritual intention. The anchor didn't create power, it held focus, and focus, repeated consistently, created atmosphere. Overnight water was sometimes used because it sat undisturbed for hours. Stillness was believed to allow energy to settle. That was the language. The longer it remained untouched, the more symbolic weight it carried in ritual. But here's what most fear-based teachings leave out. The object only functioned as an anchor when there was active intention behind it. If no one is projecting intention, there is no ritual. If no one is assigning meaning, there is no anchor. Water sitting on your nightstand because you're thirsty is not participating in a ceremony. The real vulnerability was never the glass itself. It was ignorance combined with fear. When someone hears, "Never drink water left overnight," and immediately feels panic, that reaction reveals something deeper. Fear grants agreement. Agreement gives imagined authority. And imagined authority creates psychological bondage. Darkness prefers superstition over understanding. If believers start avoiding normal objects as if they are cursed by default, they unintentionally elevate objects above the authority they already carry. The truth I learned after leaving witchcraft is this: intention flows downward from authority. If your home is aligned with God, objects inside that home do not override that alignment. They submit to it. The danger is not in the water. The danger is in misplaced authority. In the next chapter, I need to address why certain testimonies exaggerate this topic and how fear-based deliverance teaching can accidentally create the very anxiety it claims to break. This is where we have to slow down and be honest. After I left witchcraft and began sharing my testimony, I noticed something troubling. Some teachings about objects, portals, and overnight items were spreading faster than truth. The warnings became louder than the wisdom. The fear became stronger than the faith. And I recognized something. Fear itself was functioning like a ritual. In occult practice, repetition builds belief. Belief builds expectation. Expectation shapes perception. If someone is told repeatedly that an ordinary glass of water left overnight is spiritually dangerous, their mind begins scanning for signs of danger. Every bad dream becomes, let me correct something clearly. It was never the water. In every ritual environment I was part of, what actually opened doors was not an object sitting quietly in a room. It was alignment, agreement, repeated participation in thoughts and behaviors that contradicted truth. Objects were props. Agreement was power. If someone was actively involved in occult practices, speaking certain invocations, meditating on certain intentions, and deliberately assigning meaning to objects, that created participation. That created spiritual alignment with something outside of God's authority. But a believer who loves God, prays in their home, and leaves a glass of water by the bed because they might wake up thirsty is not participating in ritual. There is so what do you do with all of this? First, you breathe. You do not run through your house throwing away cups. You do not panic and assume every normal habit is spiritually dangerous. That kind of reaction actually gives fear a louder voice than truth. What I learned after leaving witchcraft is this: authority is quiet. It is steady. It does not flinch at ordinary objects. If you have water by your bedside and you suddenly feel anxious because of something you heard, pause and ask yourself, who has authority in this home? If your life is aligned with God, your home is under His covering. Objects inside that space do not override that covering. They do not gain independent power simply because they sat still for a few hours. Now, if leaving water uncovered overnight feels unhygienic, cover it. That is practical wisdom. If you prefer fresh water in the morning, pour a new glass. That is common sense. But do not make decisions out of fear of hidden rituals happening without your participation. Darkness requires cooperation. And here is the most freeing truth I can give you. You cannot accidentally participate in a ritual you never agreed to. Agreement matters. Intention matters. Repetition matters. A random cup of water sitting untouched does not equal spiritual consent. What does matter is atmosphere. Is there peace in your home? Is there prayer? Is there gratitude? Is there unity? That atmosphere carries far more spiritual weight than any object ever could. When I was in witchcraft, we avoided certain homes, not because of what objects were inside them, but because of the spiritual stability inside them. Some houses felt guarded, not loud, not dramatic, just anchored in peace. Ritual attempts in those environments lost momentum quickly because there was no internal agreement to attach to. That's what you focus on. If you want to protect your family, cultivate consistency, speak calmly, pray intentionally, remove ongoing sin patterns that create internal conflict. Guard your mind from paranoia based teaching. Spiritual maturity is not about scanning for hidden threats in normal routines. It is about understanding authority so deeply that threats lose their intimidation. If someone tells you, never drink water left overnight, and it creates panic, ask yourself, is this producing wisdom or anxiety? Wisdom brings clarity. Anxiety brings confusion. God does not build his children on confusion. So here is the balanced conclusion. Water is water. Objects are objects. Authority is spiritual. If your life is aligned, your home is aligned. If your home is aligned, ordinary habits do not become spiritual traps overnight. Instead of fearing a cup, build a culture. Build peace. Build prayer. Build unity. Build discernment. That is what actually protects a family. And if tonight you leave a glass of water by your bed, let it be exactly what it is: preparation for thirst, nothing more. Then sleep in confidence, not superstition, because the greatest defense against darkness is not paranoia, it is settled authority. There is one final layer to this that I have to share, because this is the part no one told me when I first came out of witchcraft. When I left, I went through a season where I overcorrected. I saw danger everywhere. I questioned normal habits. I examined objects. I evaluated rooms. I was hyper aware of everything. And do you know what that did? It kept my mind tied to the very system I thought I had escaped. Witchcraft trains you to look at the physical world as spiritually charged. Every symbol means something. Every object might hold something. Every pattern might be intentional. That mindset creates constant scanning, constant alertness,